Don't look now, but spring football is officially here. It's never too early to talk about the pigskin, and as teams officially return to the practice fields, we're breaking it all down, giving our thoughts, top storylines, position battles. This is the 2025 SEC Spring Football Preview. I am Chris Phillips. He is Dave Shumate. He is Cole Thompson. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Again, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Check us out via podcast, wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us across all social media platforms, as well as our website, secunfiltered.com. As always, we're powered by our friends over at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/SECU to join today and get started with $150 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. Once again, that's FanDuel.com/SECU to get started with $150 in bonus bets today. Spring football is officially here. We've already seen some film from some places across the SEC, but everyone this month is going to get back on the field. The preparations for the 2025 college football season are officially beginning. This is when championships are won. This is when the stars of tomorrow are born. Spring football is officially back. And again, we are here previewing, breaking it all down, talking storylines, talking position battles, and everything in between. Guys, once again, I'm Chris Phillips. Joining me and helping me do so, my good friends Dave Shumate and Cole Thompson once again are back with me. The trio is back together. Guys, what's going on? Appreciate y'all taking the time. Excited, man. It's been a while, I feel like, since all three of us has been together talking college football. It feels good to be doing so.
Oh, fire up. The boys are back in town, baby. It feels like Sunday fun day before Bear became a dictator and took over the show by himself. We had
Absolutely, I did. I want to make sure that we kept the content.
We had a little bit of a democracy there. Bear taking over it now. But it's fun to be back with you guys now. Chris is right. A little nostalgic, bringing us back to the fall.
What I'm just excited about is like this is when you go into a restaurant and you get to indulge on Cheddar Bay biscuits or like breadsticks from Olive Garden. Like it's the appetizer before the main course. I miss football. I miss it on my television screen. I miss talking about it with actual events and not living in the hypothetical world. We don't have to edit anymore at this point. It's not the whole course, but we'll take what we got and we'll be able to work with it for the next few weeks.
Guys, let's start with this. We're going to go through, by the way, team by team, just talk about some of the things we're excited about, top storylines. There's obviously some very low-hanging fruit with some very notable position battles. We'll talk about those as well. But, guys, again, let's address this. Spring football looks different this year, unlike it ever has, right? And I think this is something where if you've been following closely over the last few years, right, we've already seen some teams, whether it's modified spring games or some teams not hitting in spring games, right? Missouri and Kentucky come to mind last year. What Ole Miss did, they had essentially a dunk contest and a fan appreciation day instead of a spring game. It's going even a step further now this spring, right? Texas is not having a spring game. Steve Sarkisian went as far as to say it's going to be more of an OTA style. Oklahoma came out, said they're going to have a quote-unquote Crimson Combine, going to be more of a skills challenge and a traditional type of combine, if you will, for the fans. I'm sure Ole Miss is going to do something similar to last year. Missouri not having a spring game. I want to get you guys' thoughts, and I know you guys have talked about this. You've done a really good job on the overtime drive and some other stuff you guys have done from a content perspective, but thoughts on what spring football is now? Because, again, we have to address the elephant in the room. We're all still really excited about it. We're fired up. Football is back. Heck, I saw a clip from Alabama's spring practice, and I'm just fired up to see guys in helmets slinging the pigskin around. But it's different now. I mean, it just is. It's different now. And for those of us who have grown up with this sport, we love this sport. Some of us, our most fond memories are going with family to spring games to now think about the reality that we may not have those. And who knows? I mean, we're going to continue to get news. I'm sure there's going to be some others that pop up that maybe aren't going to have that traditional spring game. It doesn't change the excitement in regards to following along, again, if there's a big position battle or just hearing about certain players. But the dynamic is different this spring. There's no question.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the days you get 90,000 at a spring game. 70,000 you were made fun of on the message boards back in the right when Shannon Terry was the owner of Rivals. I mean, you get made fun of on SEC Rant, stuff like that. Now it's about, I think, the time efficiency in your time. Again, there's so much going on now in college football. You're retaining your roster, you're recruiting, you're looking 2 or 3 classes down the line, trying to save time here. I think coaches kind of have thrown the spring ball to the wayside, right, wrong, or differently. I think it's kind of why would I go give Cole Thompson reps if Cole's going to transfer in at the end of the spring? Not saying you're a quitter, Cole, but just using you as an example.
Sure,
But like, if you throw him into it's like, why would I give him reps for 15 practices when he's inevitably going to leave? Again, we've seen all these coaching staffs too. All these guys that have any nitpicky kind of injury, they're really not participating. I see both sides of it. Yes, fans were asking the average 8 to 5 man to pay for these roster. Again, we'll talk about this for years. I mean, we won't have much longer of that, but still, they should get some kind of like gratitude back to be around the team. And I think you can supplement that in another way. I do also get it from the football teams, the coaches, staff. It's kind of just a time waster right now. I think we're going to go to some like 10-day OTA, which I think will be efficient. So I see it from both angles.
My only question is going to be, and I heard Dabo Swinney talk about this, that the transfer portal narrative of players entering the portal or their rosters being riddled by the portal, it's still going to exist. I want to see, does that change the narrative around spring games? Because for some people, Matt Rule being one of them, openly adamant about my roster being depleted by names that I view as depth pieces that could become plug and play starters at any moment, now getting offers and NIL deals to leave the university after the spring. So if that continues to happen, does that change how we view spring games moving forward? I'm also the proponent of, I'm a college football fan. The more football, the better. And I understand that in the last 2 decades, with now broadcasting rights and the SEC network broadcasting the games and you being able to listen to it on the radio and the narrative about how spring is different. Yeah, certainly you want to have that feel, but at the same time, as somebody that grew up going to spring games, as somebody that lived in the Southeastern region, as somebody that cares about college football and was indoctrinated in understanding what this sport was, and I made it my entire livelihood based off of just going to the events around spring games, that has value to it. And for a lot of people that truly embrace the culture of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, or Starkville, Mississippi, or Gainesville, Florida, the spring game or the spring events are the one time that they get to go and actually see the team that they care, bleed the colors for, and would be willing to lay down their life to watch a national championship fall into their laps, get to go to because of what the asking price is for college football games these days. So you have to find a way, I think, to recoup the best avenue to allow fans to still embrace what is spring football without having an opportunity to go ahead and reach your portal. And by the way, within 2 years, we will have a good inclination on our rosters still being hindered by portal success in the spring, or is that something that actually is worthy and note conversary where there is a actual kind of baseline of, hey, this is what happens in the portal. Here's how we combat it to make sure that we still give out great product out before we go into the summer workouts and then the start of fall camp.
Yeah, guys, again, as we dive into each and every single individual team and their storylines, again, I think the overarching storyline, or one of them at least, is just what do spring games look like? Maybe is it the return of fan appreciation days that we used to have where guys would just kind of sit around, sign autographs? I'm sure they'll find a way to kind of plug and play that with NIL. And, these schools are going to be smart. They're going to be creative. Speaking of, guys, again, we're going to dive into each of these teams individually, top storylines, biggest questions, position battles, you name it, everything in between. Let's start. We're going to go in alphabetical order, starting with the Alabama Crimson Tide. I forgot to mention, too, Kalen DeBoer has already come out and said that their A-Day spring game is going to be a little bit different. I don't know what that means. We don't know what it's going to look like, but I'd probably imagine it's not going to be a traditional spring game. Either way, guys, as we talk Alabama, of course, the Crimson Tide have already hit the practice field. They have already started the spring game. I forget the exact date. Will be in early April, though, kind of that typical first Saturday, I think, in the month of April. But the big one for me, guys, and I'll take the low-hanging fruit, very simple, quarterback play. I think Alabama, you look at their roster, what they have coming back, they're going to be one of the most experienced teams in the conference. And you look at some of the top guys they have returning, Alabama should be right there in the mix to make a college football playoff. Certainly there's a lot of pressure on Kalen DeBoer this offseason, this preseason, getting Alabama back to that point. But for me, quarterback is the pick to click. Is it going to be a youngster like Keelan Russell, who's already had some of his throws in practice, drive people crazy on social media? Is it going to be Ty Simpson? Is it going to be Austin Mack? And, of course, Ryan Grubb, his first spring as the OC, first year with Alabama as the offensive coordinator. The offensive side, quarterback specifically, the biggest thing I'm paying attention to. And I'll be listening, trying to read between the lines when it comes to the quarterback position this spring.
Yeah, I'll go. You're right. It's the low-hanging fruit one. I think it's the obvious. I'll go the interior of the offensive line there. How do you replace Tyler Booker, who I think is one of the overall better players in the entire sport, best offensive lineman in the SEC by far. I think I gave him that award in our postseason awards. It's there. I mean, does Cam Dewberry, the transfer from Texas A&M, come in and take that spot? We obviously got Jaden Roberts coming back. It'll be interesting. I think that's a big spot to keep an eye on. I think they got enough pieces elsewhere the team. But yeah, outside of the quarterback spot, that offensive line at the very least, who starts in that left guard spot and the depth around it.
Let's talk about the running back room. I think it's really interesting that last year everyone believed that Justice Haynes and Jam Miller were going to be that 1-2 combination to pair with Jalen Milroe. Well, Milroe's gone. He's off to the NFL. Justice Haynes is heading on up to Ann Arbor. You still have Jam Miller. But one of the bigger underlying traits about a Kalen DeBoer offense to really take flight is a stable running back. They had Dylan Johnson out in Seattle for the 2023 season. You have Jim Miller. What does your supporting cast look like? Richard Young's there. You have Traylon Washington, Daniel Hill. You have some other younger guys that are trying to compete for a bigger role. And now that you also bring in Ryan Grubb as your offensive coordinator, if you can establish the run very early on and a good combination about who fits what role, guy being a 3-down back, somebody being the change of pace with the speed element, somebody out of the backfield as a security blanket in the passing game. How does that elevate this unit to become a top 25 scoring offense, to be better on third down, to be more cohesive with the explosive plays to where teams are going to start corralling the box, and then you can take those deep shots to a Jeremy Bernard or a Ryan Williams or Isaiah Horton coming on in from Miami. Really solid complimentary number 2 receiver. One thing that I still think is really important for most teams in the SEC, if you can establish the run and you can feel like that you have a cohesive balance in your offensive approach, it really does wonders for you to kind of keep teams on their toes defensively. I want to see this rushing attack that last year ranked 47th, which feels very low for Alabama standards, kind of reach more so closer to that top 25 range.
Guys, let's go to the Arkansas Razorbacks, Fayetteville. It's a big year for Sam Pittman. I've got 2 that I'll hit on field and off field. One on field, one off field. On field, who's going to replace Jaquin Jackson? I think hearing about who are going to be those top playmakers in the backfield, they're going to help Taylon Green. That's going to be the big question mark for me. He was such a bell cow for them a season ago. Who's going to step up in the running game? And then, guys, really the overarching theme for me is this Sam Pittman's last spring in Fayetteville. I mean, it's just we're coming to the end of the line, it feels like, in his tenure. Many folks are ready to move on 2 years ago. I know last year, obviously, you do get to a bowl game, but that program just feels like in a rut right now, and I just wonder, are we seeing the final days of Pittman? There is the hog boss. So, again, running back position and then just the Pitt boss as a whole, man, I just wonder if the clock isn't ticking on his tenure there.
I'm going to go the same spot, same position group, fellas. I mean, I think.
And you can repeat, by the way. You ain't got to come up with something new.
Yeah. No,
I told y'all, some of these are obvious, right? I mean.
No. I'm going to go the offensive line as well. They lost some key pieces, and I think also I don't think they replaced them with any better players. I think Corey Robinson leaving Georgia Tech. I remember recruiting Corey. Has some question marks. Don't know if he'll be a great player. Caden Kittler at center. We signed him when I was at UCF. Good kid, good player. Don't know if he can last in the SEC. I think they got worse on the offensive line personnel-wise off a not a great offensive line to begin with going off last year. So not high on Arkansas going to the spring, to your point, Chris. By choice is he going, or they kind of work out a deal and they kind of tell him to move on, and again, it's mutual. Again, I don't think he would just be fired, but still, that's my question mark. Offensive line's got to get going.
I have compared Taylon Green to Taco Bell at 2 a.m. multiple times. If you're drunk or sober, that's the version you get. Well, let's talk about those hot sauce packets. That is the wide receiver core. Because if you lose Luke Haas to Ole Miss, you lose Isaiah Satenga to Oklahoma, and you lose Andrew Armstrong to the NFL draft. So what do you replace him with? Omega Blake, really good vertical wide receiver, comes on in from Charlotte. Courtney Crutchfield, he's a native of Arkansas. He played last year at Missouri, didn't really see the field. Now he gets to go ahead and get back to the natural state. How do you feel about your number 3 option with it being Raylan Sharp? How do you feel about your tight end play with either Jalen Pratt or Andreas Paskey? Because those hot sauces, they can elevate a meal within 5 seconds. They can elevate Taylon Green's game. I'm very excited to see what he gets to work year 2 underneath a guy like Bobby Petrino and the offensive personnel. The thing that I really want to hear coming out of Fayetteville as we enter the summer workouts is, hey, Courtney Crutchfield, don't look now, but this kid, he's got something special. Hey, don't look now. Omega Blake, He may lead in the SEC in yards after catch. He's winning every single battle. We appreciate what he provides for our team. So I want to see how those hot sauce packages, let's say that 3 times fast. Those hot sauce packages pair alongside with the Taco Bell that is Taylor Green at 2 a.m.
But you think, Bear, they're going to be more like that salsa verde package?
They're going to be the milder medium. They're not going to be Diablo, which, by the way, Diablo is the best sauce. I will argue with you as long as day on that one.
I actually agree with you on that one, Cole. I like Diablo as well.
Exactly. It's the best one. That's
Dude,
fun.
anybody used to remember they used to have this like creamy chipotle sauce they used to have?
Oh, it was so disgusting.
I don't think I remember that one.
Delicious.
No.
It was disgusting.
Yeah.
Salsa verde is almost at that level. Like, it's like that, and then salsa verde is like right above it. And now we're talking about Taylor Green and salsa verde. Never thought that you'd get that in SEC Unfiltered.
Indeed. Guys, big year 3 incoming for Hugh Freeze at Auburn. The Auburn Tigers, a very important spring. A lot of new faces for them. Specifically, the quarterback position is one that all eyes will be on. I'll let one of you guys talk about that more in detail. Certainly, that's a big storyline. But for me, the thing I'm most intrigued by with Auburn is some new pieces should lead to some new results, but I think this spring is big for Auburn from a cultural perspective and a leadership perspective. They found ways to lose games last fall, and that team inexplicably did not go to a bowl game with the talent they had. And again, it almost like it was ingrained in their DNA. Get to the end of games and find ways to lose. Are new leaders in that building and new leaders of that football team going to change that? Is the culture – because this is when that's laid. This is when it's established, right? Your culture's not built. You wake up on game day in the first game of the season, and, hey, we're winners. We know how to win. This is where you lay that. I wonder, can Hugh Freeze get through to these guys? Is he the answer? Is he the right guy? I don't think talent's the problem. Auburn should be a team that wins 8+ games this season. They should be a team, and some people may scoff and laugh at that, but with the talent they have – the schedule they have, which we'll talk about this preseason, they should be in the mix. It's one guy's fault if it doesn't happen. His name is Hugh Freeze. And so this is put up or shut up time. The time you lay the foundation is now. Build that culture. Maybe it's too little too late and he is what he is, but I just think this is when you learn how to win. You learn how to do the little things the correct way. Literally in spring ball, you are focusing on yourself and the fundamentals. I think it's a pivotal spring for them. And again, are we really going to be able to report on this and know this? I don't know that we will, but that's the thing. You obviously want to hear positive reports on that. Yeah, this team looks different. They sound different. They're acting different. They're executing different. Maybe Hugh Freeze is a little bit different. I don't know, but something's got to change for something to change, and it's got to start in spring for Hugh Freeze and his football team and his football program as a whole.
Hey, I had a bar back. My boss right out of college when I did an initial bar back job said, work harder or work smarter, not harder. I'm going to take the low hanging fruit here. I'm going to go quarterback spot. I like everything else around them as long as they don't have some critical injuries. I think DJ Durkin's going to do a phenomenal job. He always has good defenses. Ohio State tried to steal him. I think they've accumulated enough talent on the personnel side of things on defense to be really good next year. I think they obviously got the weapons. We know Cam Coleman and the guys coming in. We have that. We know that. It comes out of the quarterback spot. It lost them games last year, literally. Peyton Thorne did. Great kid, whatever it could be. Just lost them games this year. I think it all comes down to Jackson Arnold. I mean, it really does. I think Auburn could be one of the more improved teams in the country. And again, I always say it's not saying a lot. They only won 5 games last year. But I think if they got to that 9-win mark, they would truly be in that conversation, a 4-win improvement. I think it starts at the quarterback spot. I think it can be better. We all know it was a rough situation in Oklahoma for a million different reasons that we don't have to go into. But I ask y'all a question. How would y'all feel about Auburn if John Mateer was their quarterback going into the season right
now? 9-3 should be at least the expectation.
Yeah. With that schedule.
9-3 absolutely should. So Dave took the very low-hanging fruit, and I should take the low-hanging fruit, but I like going bold and outside the box. Dave brought this up. DJ Durkin always has a great defense, and here's the thing. Money talks, and money talked on him staying in Auburn, Alabama versus going to Columbus, Ohio. So what does this defense look like in year 2? What more can we see from a more seasoned unit in the secondary? Last year, they ranked 52nd in passing yards allowed. They ranked 58th in total touchdowns allowed through the air. They have some veterans. They have more experience in that position. Jay Crawford at the cornerback spot. Champ Anthony is back in there. Caleb Harris is playing safety. Kalen Lee is still starting for another year. And they have some young guys that they have a lot of faith in. Anquan Fagan is the new starting free safety. Eric Winters, the four-star defensive back, comes on in. They have Donovan Starr. So what can I see from this secondary unit that allows them to feel confident that they can win battles against very solid wide receiver play when they take on Missouri, when they take on a team like Oklahoma, when they take on a team like Arkansas? What are we going to see from that position? And what are we going to see from that front seven? Because Keldrick Falk is one of the best pass rushers in the SEC. I think Malik Blockton is one of the better interior defensive linemen. I think Karan Crawford is one of the best standing outside pass rushers in college football. So if you add those elements together, and that can be your foreground, especially week one, because we're going to find out a lot about what Auburn can be when they take on Baylor down in McLean Stadium in Waco, Texas. If they can set the identity throughout spring and have one cohesive balance to where same mind, same direction, flying to the football, a good understanding about what we have to do to get our assignments clicking, I think that Auburn's one of those teams that we don't know what to expect, but that makes them dangerous in their own right.
Guys, let's go down to Gainesville, Florida. The Florida Gators will hit the practice field. And again, big year upcoming for them as Florida tries to return to former glory. I am going to go the low-hanging fruit since I let it go on the last team we discussed. I'm just excited to hear about the continued progression of DJ Lagway. This is his football team. You know, it's no longer Graham Mertz. He's coming in relief. He's going to be the savior, the hero. He is QB1. This is his first spring as QB1. This time last year, we were talking about the DJ Lagway hype. We saw him in the orange and blue game, and we got kind of a taste of what he could be. Now it's his show. Obviously, they got to find some guys around him, some weapons to help. Offensive line was a question last year. But again, I'm just so stoked to hear about the continued progression of DJ Lagway. It's a huge year for Billy Napier, of course. His seat, there's still a lot of pressure. But if Florida is going to get back to former glory, back to challenging the upper echelon of the SEC, back to what Florida fans and those affiliated with Florida football feel like it should be, it's going to start at the quarterback spot, one of the best young bright stars in college football. So give me all the DJ Lagway content this spring.
Yeah, I'm going to see let's see if the defense can kind of take that next step this year, in my opinion. Like, can it become, I mean, like when we think of Florida, yeah, we think of the Steve Spurrier days with the great offenses. We think of Urban Meyer, obviously, with the great offenses. But they all were really good on defense, too. And we all know that's where the championship level teams really are produced. You got to start on the defensive side of the ball, specifically the defensive line. But I'm just really talking about the defense in general. See, Florida gets a little nastier. I mean, I feel like the last 3 or 4 years, there's been major holes on one of the three levels, either defensive line, linebacker, or the secondary at some spot just has not hit. It's year 4 for Billy. I want to see it kind of take that next step. You made some changes. You have Ron Roberts, Vinny Cinceri's a co-DC now. Austin Armstrong's no longer in Gainesville. So you shuffled some things around. You had Patrick Toney before. There's not been a lot of continuity. This is year 4. Let's see a big step, I think, defensively here. Will we or will we not? I'm not making that prediction. I just think that's something to monitor.
DJ Lagway has the opportunity to be the best quarterback in college football by the end of 2025. But like in every great movie, you need a good supporting cast. So who steps up in that wide receiver and that tight end room? We know that Jaden Baugh is going to be awesome out of the backfield as the new leading rusher. We know that there is decent play at wide receiver with Aiden Mizell coming back as the vertical threat and Trey Wilson now going to be fully healthy this offseason. I like the tight end room. I really do. I think Hayden Hansen can have a breakout year. I think Tony Livingston can have a breakout year. They brought in J. Michael Sturdivant from UCLA. He can be a difference maker on the outside. But 2 names I'm really going to be paying attention to. 2 early enrollees. Vernell Brown, the 5-star wide receiver, the top 4-star wide receiver out of Orlando. Number 3 player in the state. Number 5 total wide receiver in the 24/7 2025 class. And then Dallas Wilson from Tampa. Remember, Dallas Wilson committed to play for Oregon, got out of that commitment, immediately enrolled in at Florida, so that way he could start building that rapport and that relationship with DJ Lagway. You don't have those 2 veterans like you had last year in Shamir DK and Elijah Badger. So this is an open competition for really anybody to take on over as wide receiver 1. I really like Vernell Brown's game. I think that if he can build that rapport very early with number 2, he may end up being the number 1 in Gainesville for the next 2 or 3 seasons and eventually a first-round pick. But it starts in the spring. What does the supporting cast look like around DJ Lagway to start us making feel comfortable with that daunting schedule that SEC Satan himself came up with, that this team can still be in that conversation for 8-9 wins?
Guys, how about the defending SEC champions, that being Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs? I'm going to go with the offensive line. Georgia loses 4 starters from a year ago, and they couldn't run the football last year, guys. It was weird. It was weird to watch a Georgia team that struggled to run the football the way they did. I think they were around 100th in the country in rushing offense, just could never get it going right. We sounded like broken records, us three here on Sunday Fun Day, talking about this over. Well, Georgia found a way, but they couldn't run the football. They still can't run the football. We just kept waiting and waiting and waiting, and it never happened. So does a new cast up front lead to new results when it comes to the running game, or does it take a step back even? And now you got a new quarterback too. You got to break him in. Yes, you added weapons on the outside, but guys, we all know, and Kirby would agree, it's a line of scrimmage league, and if you get your ass whooped up front more often than not, you're not going to have much of a chance. Drew Bobo taking over at center as well, at least right now. That's what we expect. We'll see. I know my boy Dave over here had some choice words for Drew Bobo last season. So we'll see. 4 new starters. I need to see the running game take a step forward, get back to Georgia football, punching people in the mouth. It starts in the spring, hearing the reports and different things in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, my eyes, obviously you can go the Gunnar Stockton route's one. Obviously, it's a low-hanging fruit. Mine's the youth on the defense, man. I mean, it's one of the youngest they've been in a while on defensively. Obviously talented. We know that. It's going to be like that every year. Some youth. So it'll be interesting to see this team kind of continually grow in the spring. And again, I'm sure they don't have like massive expectations for this in the spring, kind of getting their feet wet. But this is a team that I think is going to get better as the year go on. But again, with me and Bear talked about it last night on our show. Their Tennessee game in Knoxville's 3rd game of the year. It'll be a big one first. Kind of a new, younger defense, replacing a lot of guys, having to go on the road against an offense that's traditionally pretty good. So it'll be interesting there, first real test. But I'm interested to see just them overall as a defense with Glenn Shumate. It's probably one of the more younger, inexperienced teams Georgia's had on defense, on the defensive side of the ball in a while. Interesting to see it.
This is the number 1 team in the country last year in drops. That's what we have to talk about. Like, yes, we can go ahead and say that Carson Beck underwhelmed. We can talk about how the offensive line was unstable. We can talk about the play calling from Mike Bobo. We can talk about countless things. But when your wide receivers are dropping passes left and right, there is an internal issue. So what did Kirby Smart do? He went out and he brought in Noah Thomas, a 6'6" wide receiver from Texas A&M that is a mismatch nightmare in the end zone. They brought in Zachariah Branch to hit the reset button after a stellar freshman campaign out at USC. They still have Dylan Bell and they still have Oscar Delp. They did a good job, in my opinion, of replenishing when it comes to the recruiting Taylor from Taylor and CJ Wiley. Who are your guys? Just who is going to be able to hold on to the football through contact for either Ryan Pelusi or Gunnar Stockton and guarantee you that we're moving the sticks in the right direction? Because part of the issues that really struggled with Georgia last year, when we talk about all the other insecurities, is the fact that there wasn't a Brock Bowers or a Ladd McConkey. And it's very hard to find those type of players out in college football. But my God, just find somebody, anybody, who is a simple, do-it-all, going to go up and make a play on a football, come down, grab hands, and not be afraid to catch a football. Who's wide receiver number 1? Is it Branch? Is it Thomas? Is it a freshman? Is it Bell? Is it Delp? No drops. I want to see stick them on the fingers and them having to literally get their hands pulled off of their face mask afterwards just to prove that they're going to be catching balls left and right.
Guys, let's go to Lexington, Kentucky, where the expectations are much different. And, oh, by the way, I do want to highlight the fact that none of us picked the Gunnar Stockton storyline, and that just kind of goes to show. Interesting. I'm sure many of you out there, that'll be what you're paying attention to. We will be too, but we'd like to have some fun and go some different routes. Again, a place where the expectations will be much different than Athens, Georgia. That is Lexington, Kentucky. Guys, when it comes to this, Zach Calzada, I think, is going to be QB1 now. Cutter Boley's going to fight for the job.
His 7th year.
My overarching theme for Kentucky is just, what are the reasons for optimism? Are we able to find any coming out of spring ball? Because I don't know of any.
Dude, it's the most down I think people have been on the program in the Stoops era.
Is Kentucky? 13. Yeah, Stoops is back. Obviously, is Kentucky reverting back to being the Kentucky that we knew back in like the 2000s, or does Mark Stoops have something up his sleeve that we don't know about to get them back to respectability. I just don't know. I don't know what to think about this team, this program, and the trajectory of it. I thought last year was a big year for that, and obviously they failed in flying colors. So are there any reasons for optimism? That's what I'm going to be kind of searching for and kind of looking for and listening out for this spring.
No, Chris, I agree with you. I'm going to take that same one kind of big. I mean, yeah, Zach Calzada's one, but I don't think he's the answering bell. Not to steal yours, but I feel like if you're really digging deep, I mean, the big picture is what is kind of the culture around this team right now? Again, I think it's the worst the worst you've felt about this program since 2013, 2014, kind of that time before Stoops kind of went on that run there for a bit. This is the worst you felt about it. The offensive line still has not been fixed after 3 years of no one even can remember what the big blue wall looks like now. Just continually missing on transfer quarterbacks. I don't think Zach Calzada is magically going to be the one that hit after you missed on Devin Leary and Brock Vandegrift. I just don't know that you lost a lot on defense. I mean, you're not going to replace that. You had a lot of really good individual players on that team last year. I don't know. Mark Stoops doesn't really think he wants to be there anymore. 1 foot out the door. It's just kind of a sour relationship right now. So it's like you said, what do you take from this? I don't know. It's an interesting spring. It's an interesting fall.
Can the transfer portal actually provide a stable starting offensive line? Because if Kentucky is going to have 4 starters that come on in from transfer schools, Shiaz Pay comes on in from New Mexico State, Alice Wolschlager comes on in from Bowling Green, Evan Wimberly, the new starting center, comes on in from Western Kentucky, Joshua Braun comes on in from Arkansas. This was one of the worst offensive lines in pass protection last year. It didn't matter if Brock Vandegrift was playing, Carter Boley was playing, Gavin Wimsey was playing. They played probably altogether 4 solid quarters or 60 full minutes of action of decent offensive line play. Can I just have 5 dudes that will give Cutter Boley or Zach Calzada a chance to connect with a Troy Stiletto or a Kendrick Law or a Jamori Macklin downfield? Like, can I just feel like that there's some stability where I'm not shielding my eyes and hiding the children out in Lexington while I chug Evan Williams bourbon because I am too afraid to watch what this team is going to be next year. Like, I just want stability in the trenches. And you and I all know this, and fans, you know this as well. The best thing for any team to be successful is having a stable 5-man up front.
Guys, let's go down to the Bayou, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the LSU Tigers and Brian Kelly. I think there's a couple different directions you can go here. Certainly the transfer portal additions are a big one. I'll go with Garrett Nussmeier, though, in cutting down the turnovers. I think that's going to be the focus for him, as it should be. LSU was a team last year that – and Garrett Nussmeier is such a fascinating player to me, right? Because I'll go ahead and say it. Going into the 2025 season, probably all of us here, I know myself certainly – going to drop quarterback rankings. We love to do stuff like that in the preseason, rank the quarterbacks. Guys, I'm probably going to have Garrett Nussmeier number 1, but I feel icky about it. I feel icky about it. I do. I feel nasty about it.
I don't know how you couldn't.
Right,
I'm clear as day fine with that one.
But I've seen him play so poorly, like literally throw LSU out of a chance to win the football game.
I can't say Garrett Nussmeier is a great player yet. I can't say it.
I can. I'm fine with that. I'll die on that take.
And that's what I'm saying. He's a fascinating player because of that. I saw him in person make the throw down the middle to Aaron Anderson against Ole Miss. That was, God, you're like, if you can just copy paste that, that's a big-time, big league throw in a big-time moment. And then I've also seen him just multiple turnovers, again, not even give LSU a chance to win. So big spring for Garrett Nussmeier. A lot of people are going to anoint you the number 1 quarterback, maybe even in the country. It's time to take the next step and be that guy for LSU, because this is a big year for them to get into a college football playoff. The absolute minimum expectation. Oh, by the way, you open your season at Clemson against another guy in Cade Klubnik, our very own Cole Thompson. He thinks he's the best quarterback in the country. So that's a huge game for
QB2 week 1. It's just going to be decided that way.
It's a huge game for perceptions for both sides, for coaches for both sides. You better be ready to go when your ass are in gear. Garrett Nussmeier is the guy that's got to engineer that for LSU. So every snap I think he takes at any point is a big deal, certainly this spring. Cut down on the turnovers. He cuts them in half this season, guys. He can compete for the Heisman, and LSU can win the SEC. He can be that good of a player.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we all agree on the upside. But yeah, I'm not going that route. I'm kind of just excited to just see kind of the the roster has not been as good as it has or should have been over the last 2 years. And it's wild to say because this roster had a Heisman Trophy winner, Jaden Daniels, in it 2 years ago. But I just want to see what they hired Austin Thomas this offseason, his first year. This is his first real, you're going to see the fruit of his labor a little bit. I think the roster is improved. How improved? That's interesting, especially on the defensive side of the ball to me there. Because, again, I think we all kind of last year thought that would be an interesting spot. I think Jack Pyburn, they brought over from Florida, is an interesting kind of DPR kind of guy who can go make some plays. They kind of played a little money ball, paid the right guys here. Let's see if it works out. I thought Austin did a very good job in his role at Ole Miss, kind of getting that roster where it is. So, I mean, I think bringing in Jamari Butler is going to be good. Patrick Payton. I think they brought in some playmakers on that side of the ball. Can it fit? Second year under Blake Baker. Just excited for the overall roster. Nick Anderson on offense, just from a personnel perspective, because I've been real down on them personnel-wise, especially on defense for the past 2 years, and I think that's gotten better. So I hope my eyes are telling me what I think.
As the one person that doesn't have ick saying that Garrett Nussmeier is QB1 in the SEC and it's no second choice near him, part of the reason why I believe that is he had almost 115 more throws than everyone else in the SEC. And what was the reason behind that, ladies and gentlemen? They had no run game, and they haven't had a stable run game for the last 2 years underneath Brian Kelly. But Caden Durham may be the best running back prospect to come through in the Brian Kelly era. There were some moments last year where you saw him take that next step forward. There was also some moments where you saw him kind of regress, and that was because of the offensive line, the inconsistencies. Well, they went out and they brought in Braylon Moore from Virginia Tech. Josh Thompson comes on in from Northwestern. Can you establish the run game? Can you take pressure off of Garrett Nussmeier to having to throw 500 plus times in a season to then cut down on the turnovers? And if it's not him, is it maybe Caleb Jackson? Is it maybe Jawan Johnson? Is it maybe one of the freshmen that you have coming on in? Who can help you have an identity on offense, on the ground, that allows you to open up the playbook on second and short, that allows you to not live in 3rd and 4 or 3rd and 5? And the other thing that's really important, guys, is keep in mind, Garrett Nussmeier is going into year 2 as a starter. Year 2 as a starter for Joe Burrow in 2019. What did he do? Year 2 of Jaden Daniels in 2023. What did he do? If they have a stable run game, they have a secondary punch on offense, this may be the most lethal unit in the SEC and the last team that I want to face going into the fourth quarter.
Get the hype train going, Cole. Nussmeier for Heisman. You heard it here first.
Nuss bus coming down the
Hey, you missed it. Hey, Bears had 2 bold statements the last 2 nights. Garrett Nussmeier is on the hot seat. Is going to win the Heisman, and Kirby Smart is on the hot seat.
Yeah, that's the way you twist the words just to make sure it fits the narrative these times.
Oh, the Bear never disappoints. Guys, let's talk the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Jeff Lebby in year 2, still searching for his first SEC win.
I can hear the cowbells nowadays.
The cowbells are ringing. They just heard SEC.
About what it sounded like last year.
There we go. SECU talking about state. The cowbells are going. Guys, I thought Jeff Lebby made a bold decision bringing Coleman Hutzler back as his defensive coordinator. What's the defense look like? A lot of new faces. Mississippi State, by the way, I guess you could say quietly, they had a really good portal class, really good portal haul. They brought in some talent. The defense has got to get better. Blake Shapen's back at quarterback. We expect they're probably going to take a step forward offensively. We'll see last year with Michael Van Buren. He's now in Baton Rouge, by the way. The defense has to get better to give them any sort of chance to win a single conference game. So, I think Jeff Lebby stuck his neck out there, brought Coleman Hutzler back. We'll see the type of improvements they can make. What are we hearing in spring? Because if it's not any better, obviously, I think they're going to be looking for a new defensive coordinator at season's end.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chris. That was the worst defensive personnel at Mississippi State I'd seen in a long time. I mean, they got numerous NFL guys scattered around the league on that defensive line spot who played at Mississippi State. But I'm going to think this program is going to always start and end with the quarterback, with a Jeff Lebby-led team. I mean, what does Blake Shapen look like coming back off the injury? He looked pretty solid to start off the year. But again, I think we saw Michael Van Buren do some things. Obviously, he's now at LSU. Been interesting to see what those kind of conversations went like a little bit. Heard a few things, but I think they're just kind of all in on Blake Shapen. We'll see. I think it's a big second year. Me and Bear talked about it yesterday. I don't think you got to get to 6 because I think it's just going to be so hard to do. I mean, we remember how hard that road schedule was. All those teams come to town this year, which isn't going to be much easier. But I don't know. I think you got to get to 4 to 5, right? You got to see something. You got to at least get a conference win or 2. I'm not that rich saying you got to go win 6.
You can't lose to Toledo, Dave.
Well,
losing's being nice. But yeah, that's my question is just how does Blake Shapen come off the injury? Again, this program is going to be driven by the quarterback because of who their head coach is. It's where it starts and ends.
I think the other thing that's going to be really important is can you establish the run? I love the addition of Fluff Bothwell. I thought he was one of the more underrated players to come to the conference this year after what he did last season at South Alabama. But how do you establish the run? Have the 5 guys up front block for you. And honestly, that was one of the more disgusting offensive line units that we saw last season. And part of the reason why they only gave up 38 sacks instead of more than 50 is because they had a mobile quarterback in Michael Van Buren behind the line creating second chance opportunities. You may have that with Blake Shapen, but you also bring in Luke Kromenhoek, the Florida State transfer. Both are guys that I think can fit this veer and shoot offense that you want to see run by Jeff Levy. But if you don't have protection, if you don't have the avenues for a Fluff Bothwell or a Davin Lee to be able to create their opportunities in the open field, Kevon Lee, my apologies, little things like that, it becomes a major issue to where you become so one-dimensional as an offense. And I know that I am very hard on Jeff Levy. I know how most people think that I feel about Jeff Levy. I know Jeff Levy and the style of offense that he runs can work. But the only way if it works is by having an established run game. If you can't block up front, you can't create holes, you can't create opportunities for you to feel comfortable with the offensive line, you have no shot to go ahead and have a 1-2 combination.
Yeah, the big storyline in Starkville this spring, Cole, is can the bear and the dogs play nice? That's my
probably
question.
Not. It's a junkyard dog, and I'm coming.
Are bear and the dogs going to get along this season? I don't know. I don't know that they will. So
get rid of the cowbells and get rid of Brandon Walker, and we'll talk.
On that note, before we go any further, guys, I want to tell you about our friends here at FanDuel because, of course, as always, we're brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, the official partners and sponsors, by the way, of the SEC Unfiltered Tour that's sending us all over the place this spring, and it will do so this fall as well. We might even have to send Bear by himself to Starkville just to make a point. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just beginning on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because FanDuel is your home for NBA live betting. So even if you miss the first few minutes of the game, or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can make your picks from the first whistle into the final buzzer. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. However you want to play, now is the perfect time to join. New FanDuel customers get started with $150 in bonus bets. Your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/SECU to join today. That's FanDuel.com/SECU for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 and up and present in select states. For Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 and up and present in D.C. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets expires 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Connecticut, or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-8778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. All right, let's keep it moving. Let's go to one of Bear's favorite places, Columbia, Missouri. The Missouri Tigers. They're already back on the practice field. They will, for some reason, they do this every year. They finish spring ball before everyone else. There's not going to be a spring game. We know that. Missouri, with one of the more quiet 10-win seasons we've ever seen in SEC history. They just flew under the radar last year. It's no more Brady Cook. It's no more Luther Burden. That's where my question lies this spring, guys. Who is that new guy on the outside? No more Theo Weiss either. A lot of new faces on the offense. You can obviously go quarterback position, but who's going to step up on the outside and be that playmaker that Luther Burden was for that offense? That's my big question. Are we getting reports of new guys shining? Who's wide receiver 1 in Como?
Yeah, I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit on this one. I'm not going to complicate it too much.
I left it for you, Dave. I threw you the alley-oop.
Thank you. I mean, Bo Prabula, I think it's going to come down to him. I mean, again, it's just like Jeff Levy with Eli Drake. With these offensive-led coaches, it's going to come down to their quarterback play. I think Kirby Moore coming back, that's key. I think it's underrated for this program, having drinking Kirby Moore, that consistency of there. I think it's a big year in the quarter. I think defensively and the quarterback spots in this league, it's a big year. So those are a lot of the big question marks for me, and especially add Missouri to that list.
One of the more underlying traits for Missouri the last 2 years, Having a good ground game. I'm going to continue to go to the well and talk about what Ahmad Hardy comes on in from Louisiana Monroe. What does he provide along with a very stable unit overall? I love what Jamal Roberts is going to be as I think the new number one. But Hardy last season averaged 5.7 yards a play, 13 rushing touchdowns, over 1,300 yards for the Warhawks, and really kind of changed the culture out in Monroe, a team that has been known as a disastrous overall organization. What can you be as the new lead back? And can you take this team to the next step? Take a little bit of pressure off of Bo Pabula. If you and Jamal Roberts take that step forward, and keep in mind, Bo Pabula is a mobile dude. He has 9 rushing touchdowns the last 2 years, and he has shown his capable skills of being a quality, I think, dual threat passer during his tenure in Penn State. If we see that transition moving forward with a 1-2-3 combination in the backfield, you may not have to worry about who's on the outside. And by the way, Kevin Coleman in the slot this year. Get ready for a lot of explosive plays, get ready for a lot of hype, and get ready for him to potentially take on over for that Luther Burden role.
Guys, let's talk Boomer Sooner, Brent Venables, and Oklahoma. It's a big spring for them and a big year for them. Second year in the SEC, 4th year in Norman for Brent, and a year in which, let's call it for what it is, he enters on the hot seat. Guys, when it comes to this spring, I'm going to go to the offensive line. I think they're going to be better, but how much better? They have to be better. Oklahoma's got to be nastier. They got to be meaner. They just got to be better up front. I don't care about John Mateer, Deion Burks, or any of these guys if they're not better in the trenches. If you're getting your ass whooped every single play, every single week, we saw what happened last year. I think there's things to be excited about, but if they're not better up front, I don't think anything else really matters. So how big of a stride can they make? How much better can they be on the offensive line? It was almost like we kind of knew last year going in the season from the reports we had heard. Are we hearing similar things about what they look like in the trenches? Are they still light years away, or are they going to be better than we expect or maybe we think up front? That's my big question for them.
I think John Mateer's going to be really good, guys. He was my favorite quarterback coming out of the portal. I think I'm with Cole. I think Auburn's a 9-win team. If you told me John Mateer's on their team, I think he's going to have to be the difference maker for Oklahoma this year, because I still think they have a lot of holes on that roster. I think that Jim Nagy hired him will be fine, but it's going to have anything to do with this year's roster. So, I mean, I think it's going to have to be John Mateer's going to have to carry this team a lot. I think they lose enough on defense for that to be a little bit of a concern too. I think he's going to have to be special for them to get to like 9-10 wins.
When you're bringing in a brand new offense, you feel like that your defense is going to have to step on up early in the year. And for my money, part of the reason why I still believe in Brent Venables is if I was a head coach and I could hire anybody to run the show on one side of the football, BV would be on the very, very, very short list. But you did lose multiple starters this offseason. You lost your leading tackler in Danny Stutzman. You lost Billy Bowman in the secondary. You lost a couple of secondary players as well. So who steps on up? Who are the leaders on that side of the football? Is it as simple as Kip Lewis taking on a bigger role? Is R. Mason Thomas going to have a bigger role? What are we going to see from Dominic Williams, the former TCU guy? You bring in Kendall Daniels, the former Big 12 Defensive Rookie of the Year. You also have Peyton Bone, who's been in the system for several seasons. But you also have some young guys that you really have faith can take that next step forward. Jaden Jackson was a standout last year at nose tackle. David Stone was very good in a limited role. You have Taylor Wine, who is a pretty decent overall player. And then you bring in Marvin Jones, the former 4-star that was at Georgia, then transferred to Florida State. Can he revoke himself? That week 2 game is, I think, a fork in the road moment for both Michigan and Oklahoma. And I want to feel like when I'm leaving spring practice and I'm going into summer workouts, I'm hearing, yeah, the offense is kind of getting just a good footing underneath them, but good luck beating this defense. BV, once again, has his foot in his element, and he's putting it foreground, pedal to the metal. He understands that we're in a really good spot on that side of where you're only going to be able to beat us if our offense doesn't capitalize.
Dave, you mentioned 9 or 10 wins. Do you think that's realistic for OU this year?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I ain't going to be predicted. I think that's what I'm saying. I think Mateer would have to be really good.
Okay, what about 8 wins?
I just wonder what the fan base is expecting. I think that's really interesting too.
I mean, yeah, I think 8's real. I mean, would be a good year. Does that mean I think if they win 8 games, do I think Brent Venables is still the future? No. I just think that's a solid year just for 25.
Fair enough.
I think 8 wins is very capable. Now, again, here's the beauty of it. We're not Oklahoma fans. We know what the Oklahoma fans' expectations
Well, and that's what I was going to say. Their expectations are so much different than that. Like, this is a new world for Oklahoma. And I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but this is just a new world for Oklahoma football fans where it's like, hey, guys, you need to chalk up 8-4 as a successful season. They're not used to that. It's like national title or bust.
But this year is a successful season. I don't think enough people are paying enough attention to just how terrifyingly bad this schedule is for Oklahoma, especially after Red River. I mean, we're talking about South Carolina. But it's at South Carolina, it's at Ole Miss, it's at Tennessee, it's at Alabama, it's Missouri, and it's LSU.
Same schedule, yeah. It was tough. I thought they had the toughest schedule in the league last year.
I thought they had the second toughest. But what I'm saying is they have one bye during that stretch. So it's like, if the defense can hold its own just through that Michigan game, and then the offense takes another step forward, I think it's possible that
they win the hardest schedule, Bear.
What? Oh, I think Florida still does.
Last year, I thought it was Oklahoma.
I still thought Florida did. But I also thought that, again, Florida State was going to be better than advertised. And that's UCF was going to be better than advertised.
Yeah, they both weren't any good.
No, they were nowhere near what the level was.
Guys, let's go to Oxford, Mississippi. The Ole Miss Rebels, after missing the college football playoff with arguably the most talented roster in school history, I think they find themselves in sort of a unique position with Lane Kiffin. I think the expectations, you could argue, are still the same, college football playoff or maybe bust. And that's when it comes to this spring, I'm going to go a little bit of a different direction here and kind of an overarching theme of the spring. I am so fascinated by Ole Miss this season because, and Bear and I have talked about this before, I think whether it was on a show, off the record, whatever, the irony that this Ole Miss team could make the playoff this year after missing it last year when, last year was the last dance.
Isn't that how it usually happens in sports? It's not.
It's Lane Kiffin. It just screams Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, maybe not having all of the hype and and there's still going to be pressure. Don't get me wrong, but there was just a lot of hype and hoopla and pressure and expectation, and they were a shoe-in for the playoff. And if you don't go 11-1, it was just like, what happened? And we all know they fell short of expectations. Is there a sense of they're kind of flying a little more under the radar, and is that a beneficial thing for Ole Miss football this season? Because it's not like they had a terrible year, but based off of what the expectations were, the talent they had, obviously there's a lot of new faces, but still a very talented football team. I am very intrigued by Ole Miss this season. And again, it starts in the spring, a lot of new faces, but just the overarching, is this going to be the playoff caliber team? Maybe last year wasn't. I don't know. I'm curious about Ole Miss as a whole. There's too many things for me to pick here, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm going to go receiver. They lost Trey Harris, Juice Wells. The Stribling that they brought in, Harrison Wallace, guys, Traylon Ray. They brought in Caleb Odom, Caleb Cunningham from Alabama. they brought in some guys, but again, that's the little bit of the deal of playing in the transfer portal so heavy. The transfer portal isn't the same each year. For example, there wasn't a Walter Nolan in the portal this year. It's just that's why it's tough to go back each year. But I am with you. I'm intrigued. It would not shock me at all. They ended up making the playoffs this year. But I'm kind of interesting. I like Austin Simmons. I think he has a very high upside. I think he's going to be a really good player. I'm just interested to see who his major weapons are. I think going into the season, right now, I'm probably going to say Daquan Wright, maybe Luke Haz, if Haz could stay healthy, the Arkansas transfer. But I thought Daquan Wright was one of the more underrated players in the conference last year when Caden Prescorn was out for a bit. But I think he's kind of his go-to target initially. But I think someone else on the outside is going to have to step up. So I'm looking at that wide receiver spot specifically on this team heading into the spring.
I'll do two quickly. Number one, Luke Haas was just one of my favorite players to watch in 2023. Remember when he had that big-time game against LSU, 2 touchdowns, 114 yards? Thought he was going to be the difference for Arkansas. Gets hurt that year. Now he's in Oxford after what was an underwhelming season in Fayetteville. Can he live up to the hype? Because if I think for any young quarterback, having a stable tight end is always a security blanket. But the more underlying one, this is a brand new secondary. It's 5 new starters for this team on the back end. That was the only weak point last year for Ole Miss's defense. They were the number 1 run defense in the country. They were the number 2 pass rushing team in the SEC. They were great in tackles for losses. They flew to the football, but they allowed too many explosive plays. So what are we going to see this year from guys like Kanepe Gesenkin coming on in, Jalen Braxton at cornerback, Sage Ryan from LSU, Antonio Kite. You have Chris Graves stepping on up. What's TJ Banks going to look like? And Pete Golden, I think, can have yet another really solid defense. It's not going to be, I think, top 15 in the country, but it certainly could be top 30. Top 30 is good enough with this schedule to get to 10-2. But can you limit the explosive plays? And especially against this young receiver core or this unproven receiver core with Austin Simmons, can I hear on the message boards leaving practice, hey, Austin Simmons right now, he's got a lot of work cut out for him. And it's not because if he's not talented. It's because the secondary is making his life hell in practice. That's what I want to know. Will you eliminate the explosive plays? Because if you did that against Barry and Brown in week 5, you're in the college football playoff. If you did that on 4th and 5 against Aaron Anderson, you're in the college football playoff. If you did that in Gainesville in the 4th quarter, you're in the college football playoff. Can that secondary just have some bit of consistency?
Guys, Shane Beamer has spent this offseason telling everyone who will listen why the Gamecocks should have been in the 12-team college football playoff. He'll have an opportunity this fall. I didn't say that he was, but he'll have an opportunity this fall to show why he's right, as South Carolina, led by Lenora Sellers, will look to get back in that position and maybe finish the job around this season. A big spring for them. We'll see if the Garnet and Black spring game actually happens or not. I think there's a lot of different directions you can go here. I'm going to go defensively. They lose so much on the defensive side. And I'm talking high impact guys. The defensive player of the year in Kyle Kennard, Demetrius Knight, who was fantastic at the linebacker position, Nick Eamon-Warry, who I think was one of the most, maybe not by season's end, but it felt like, especially going into last year, he was one of the most underrated ball hawking safeties and headhunters at that position in the conference. So defensively, who steps up, who's helping out Dylan Stewart at the other end? One of the reasons Dylan Stewart was so ferocious as a freshman is because you had Kyle Kennard on the other side and you couldn't double up Stewart. They can't find a guy on the other end or somebody else in the D-line to take up a body. They're going to be able to double up Dylan Stewart. As good as he is, take him away, he's not going to have that same impact. And if you can't get a pass rush, well, we all know what's going to happen. So especially losing some guys in that secondary defensively, just like they did with Kennard. Maybe there's the stars of tomorrow are there, but who are they? I think that's the big question, the thing they got to try to find out this spring.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chris. That's a good one. I'm going to just go Mike Shula. I mean, I think he's going to have a big say in how much Lenore Sellers progresses. I mean, there's a phenomenal piece of clay to mold there that was really good last year off in provision. Can only get better as a quarterback. Should be one of the top quarterbacks in the league. And just overall as an offense, looking for that wide receiver one. I think last time Mike Shula was in college, a lot of people in kind of the realm where I'm from do not remember great things about Mike Shula. I'm not as down on him as a lot of people, but not the most creative guy offensively in the world. Granted, back in the mid-2000s, 2006, your last time he was there. But good opportunity. I think if it didn't work out, people would think it's a lazy hire just because you promoted it within. So, I mean, I think let's see how it gets off to the start of the spring. I'm interested in seeing that.
We got to see the rebirth of Rocket Sanders after he left Fayetteville, went down to Columbia, had over 900 rushing yards, but he's off to the NFL. So how do you replace that type of production? What's going to be the run game? One of the more underlying traits for Lenore Sellers to have in his back pocket was trusting number 5 to go blast on off. I think Rasul Faison from Utah State's a really talented player. Last season for the Aggies, he had over 1,100 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns, 5.6 yards per play. What do you think about Oscar Attaway? Can he have a bigger role with the team? What about Jerwan Howell? Does he have a pretty decent role? Jaquel Holman, what is he like? Because of the other thing that's really important that we know about a Mike Shula offense is the tight ends are always involved, as evident by his work with the guy in Greg Olson in Carolina, the mobility of a quarterback, and also having a good complementary ground game at the running back position. So do you feel like that you have the complementary running back spot to where you know if Sellers is not being able to create those open creases, where if the defense is kind of limiting his legs, well, you have that secondary punch to the outside. You have that weapon that you can trust on the ground. You have that focal point that still is an emphasis on what worked last season that you only get to continue to build off of.
Let's go to Rocky Top, guys. Tennessee was in the college football playoff where they took a beating by Ohio State, of course, the eventual national champions, but a successful season there, a double-digit win season, again, one that led to the 12-team playoff. They'll look to build on that. When it comes to Tennessee, guys, Cole, you were talking about Georgia earlier, the drops. Tennessee wasn't much different. I think arguably the most disappointing position group in the conference a season ago was the Tennessee wide receiver room. I think one of the most disappointing, at least. Just nobody helping out Nico. We were very hard and critical on Nico, and I think it was deserved at times for sure, but there wasn't a lot of help by his supporting cast. Mike Matthews is a guy, played around in the portal. He came back. What can he be? I know you guys, we all talked about was so underutilized a season ago. Can he be that wide receiver one? Chris Brazel is back, the Tulane transfer. You've got Travis Smith, the freshman. You got Radarius Jackson, the freshman. Braylon Staley is back as well. Amari Jefferson, the transfer. Who's stepping up at the receiver position? Miles Kitselman at tight end as well. Can the supporting cast be better for Nico Iamaleava? That's the big question I have. And again, it starts in the spring. Who are these guys emerging on the outside? Also, I didn't mention the running back position. I'll let one of you gentlemen maybe expand on that. But especially on the outside, the passing game just wasn't where it needed to be. Was some of that on Nico? Sure, he's got to take a step forward. But I think a lot of it was on his supporting cast, and that's got to be better in 2025.
Yeah, I think it's the offense as a whole. I mean, I've been saying it for 2 years now, and I think with the inconsistencies on offense this year, I think it could be true. I think they miss Alex Golish. I mean, you're not getting him back. He's the head coach at South Florida, but things haven't been the same since then. And you've had two different quarterbacks, and it's been the same two people, Josh Heupel, Joey Hazel, running the same thing. Hazel over there running the same thing offensively for Tennessee. But they need to get that little edge back. I don't think Tennessee's feared offensively like they were the last 2 years, or back in 21, 22, Heupel's first few years. They need to get that edge. I think defensively with Tim Banks, I think they recruited well enough. They're going to have the personnel to be good enough to win with what Heupel wants to do. It's just this offense. It's just been real clunky at times the last 2 years, especially in their bigger games against Georgia and Alabama, especially when they take the show on the road. So I think that's something I want to see. Just get the consistency back on offense. You got a returning starter in Nico coming back. Chris, to your point, the support cast, Bear may get into the running backs. I don't know. I feel like this program it's in a really good spot. It's got to take that next step, and I think that comes with the maturation of the offense overall. So I'm looking forward to the development of that.
I think you're fine at the running back spot with Deshaun Bishop, Peyton Lewis. You bring in Star Thomas from Duke. I think he's going to be a very good veteran voice in that locker room. I'm going to go full 360,000 feet up in the air kind of view. Do you feel confident in your roster going into summer practice? Guys, they only added 4 transfers this offseason. Amari Jefferson, Wendell Moe, Star Thomas, and Sam Pendleton. That was it. So you have to feel really good about the direction of the development of talent coming into this year. How do you feel about that offensive line that allowed 33 sacks last season? How do you feel about David Sanders, the 5-star offensive tackle, now being plugged in at the right tackle spot? How do you feel about how do you feel about somebody like Lance Hurd now getting yet another year of reps? How do you feel about maybe a Max Anderson having a bigger role in the offensive line? How do you feel about that defense? What about your number 2 cornerback position? Because yes, you do know that Jamal McCoy is going to be dealing with the injury, but he'll be back at some point. What about Ricky Gibson's departure? How do you feel about that? Do you like where your roster is at the end of spring to where you're not calling up the boosters and you're not calling up the collective and saying, hey, I hate to do this to you, but we got to call somebody from Oregon State to get them in here to play cornerback. Hey, I hate doing this to you guys, but we got to go find a kid from the All Sun Belt League and be able to make him a starter at center. We got to feel really good about our linebacker room. So if we can get the kid from Kent State that's balling on out, we got to pay him top dollar. Do you feel like that you did enough in the transfer portal, which is those 4 moves and the development internally, that you don't have to be spending in this spring transfer portal window? Because here's the other part that's really important. It's fair game. And those prices are going to be pretty high for some players that you may actually not want to pay for that you could have gotten in the winter window.
Well, I think to the point, if they're at the program where they should be, Bear, you should be developing high school kids. You shouldn't have to go into the portal.
And that's the main thing is that do you feel
like
you
feel that? And you're right. I guess they would answer you yes. I guess we'll find out. I'm with you. I have my doubts too.
Guys, Steve Sarkisian's already made it clear Texas will not have a traditional spring game. It sounds like OTAs or an OTA style, at least, the plan in Austin. But either way, the Longhorns are going to be on the field this spring. A lot of different directions to go here. There's a lot of excitement in Austin, obviously, after, again, going to the college football playoff, being the only team in college football, I might add, to be in the Final Four each of the last 2 seasons. They're trying to now take the next step, win the national championship, win the big one. Guys, forgive me. I'm going with the low-hanging fruit. I'm going with Arch Manning here. That is the storyline to follow in Austin. There's a lot of different directions to go. Cole, I just left one for you because you know it's your favorite player that's having to be replaced. But Arch, man, give me all the Arch content. Give me all the Arch hype, all the Arch video, everything I can get Arch Manning. I just want to hear about Arch Manning. I want to see Arch Manning. That's it for me.
Can
There's
you
a
let
lot
the
of other
kid just
stuff.
breathe for 5 minutes, please?
Listen, I'm feeding into it, man. Arch Manning, it's all about Arch in Austin, man. Hey, just signed the NIL deal with Uber and Waymo, whatever, the self-driving taxi. Hey, Arch is the man now. He's the man in the Lone Star State. He's QB1. The time is finally here. We don't have to have any more quarterback debates because Arch Manning is that dude, and I can't wait to hear all about it.
I'm going to go with Arch Manning's insurance policy, the offensive line. I think Kyle Flood's going to, speaking of some flood insurance, I think before that gets into Arch's lap, he's going to earn his paycheck this year. I mean, you lose for sure 3 real contributors, depending on how some of these people look at Cam Williams. 4. You have to replace that. I mean, it's going to be interesting. They struggled a little bit last year, and you're not going to have all those answers at the end of the spring, not when you're replacing that many starters off the sudden. Some of those battles, probably at least one, is going to go into fall camp. So, again, not having practice here, this is maybe where that may hurt you a little bit. Now that I'm thinking, I literally just thought about that. I'm like, you're not having a lot of contact practice there. Always mention that's why tackling's bad in the sport right now. If you don't practice it, how could you possibly improve? Similar to offensive line play from that perspective. So I think that's a very key position to look at early before we can even really get a real gauge on Arch. If a lot of people are sitting in his lap, and as we know, they head to Columbus for that rematch from the college football semifinal this past year against Ohio State to open up the years. That'll be a first tough test, I should say, for that offensive line.
Texas had one of the best offensive lines in the country last year that allowed them to make it to the SEC championship. The reason they were able to win multiple college football playoff games is because they had the number 1 defense. How do you replace 2 names in the middle for a 3rd consecutive year? Because in 2023, they had 2 of the best interior defensive linemen in Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat. Last year, they had 2 exceptional defensive linemen in Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton. They could throw in Baron Sorrell as well if you wanted to. How do you replace that front defensive line to set the tone for the back 7? What do you think of Travis Shaw coming on in, the defensive lineman from North Carolina? What do you think of Cole Brevard coming on in from Purdue? What do you think of Hero Canoe, the former Ohio State nose guard who was a rotational player? Justice Terry, the 5-star defensive talent enrolled on campus. How is he going to be a factor in week 1 or in year 1? What can you see from that interior defensive line that allows offenses to basically have to pivot away from the rushing attack inside the red zone, and you can only win through the air? And we know that the air attack is going to be a docile environment because of what you have in the secondary with Mookie Taft coming on back in. So do you have the same type of gusto, and did you land the right amount of talent to replace guys for a 3rd consecutive offseason to make sure that your front 4 is still the most ferocious in the SEC? And a low-hanging fruit, what are we going to see from wide receiver number 3? Khalil Lockett and Jamie French are going to be competing, I think, for that wide receiver number 3 spot, along with DeAndre Moore and Ryan Wingo. They're freshmen. Can you be this reincarnation of Xavier Worthy? Can the hype be there for Arch Manning so that everyone can actually say Cole is an idiot and Chris Phillips is right?
And who's going to be the new Matthew Golden for Cole Thompson this season? That's my question.
God.
That was your favorite. We got to find a new.
I already know who that's going to. Bears going with KC Concepcion, the team we're talking about next.
Speak of the devil, the Texas A&M Aggies and KC Concepcion. Yeah, Cole very much so one of Cole's favorites. Again, the Aggies, year 2 of Mike Elko as Texas A&M looks to shake the Texas 8-4 mantra, which followed them after last season and was only reinforced after starting 7-1 and losing 4 of the last 5, including the bowl game against USC, a game in which I'll never forget going live with Cole Thompson at like 1:30 in the morning and just laughing our asses off at how could this happen. Of course it did. It's the Aggies. But either way, a lot of hype, a lot of expectations. Guys, this spring, again, a lot of different directions you can go here. I just think year 2 of Mike Elko, how different does it look? I thought going into year 1, keeping realistic expectations, because I think a lot of people don't give enough credit to when you're trying to change a culture. And I heard Cole talk about this, the stench that still resided around that program from the Jimbo Fisher era. It wasn't going to go away in the course of one offseason. And I think a 7-1 start kind of got people out over their skis a little bit and made them forget, like, There's still things behind closed doors. I mean, talking to
Hey,
folks
Chris
there at
Phillips can tell you that's not how you ski, folks. Just
it's
ask.
not. Trust me,
You
I've
don't, you
I've
don't
eaten
pizza
it.
when you're supposed to French fry. That's for damn sure.
That's how you have a bad time. Trust me. But, going there, guys, even at the end of the season and talking to folks there in College Station, they mentioned people don't realize what Mike Elko walked into and just how much he had to change. Can they take that next step? Like, I look at the offensive side, and you look at some of the returning production numbers that our buddy Bill Connolly has dropped. And, guys, you look at the offensive side, here's a great place to start. The offensive line. Redshirt senior, junior, senior, redshirt senior. They're veteran in the trenches. They're experienced there. We know about Marcel Reed. He's got to take the next step. They got some new weapons. But I'm just fascinated as a whole, what does the product look like in year 2 of Mike Elko as he's continuing to put more and more of his stamp on this program? And I think a lot of us believe he's the right guy. Can they shake that 8-4 mantra and get past that and kind of show like this is a new era of A&M football? Or is it just going to be more of the same and 4+ losses is something you can bank on every single Texas A&M season?
I'm going to get right to the point. Colin Klein, most weapons he has had in his entire career. He's had Deuce Vaughn, probably his best weapon he ever had going back to his Kansas State days. Now he's got Cole's guy, Cole's favorite receiver in the league, Kevin Concepcion, Jonah Wilson, Mario Craver. You got guys like that. I mean, add in Terry Bussey at the running back, kind of your skill, do everything kind of guy. He's there. Le'Veon Moss, Amari Daniels. They have guys. Obviously, Marcel Reed's got to keep developing. But there's enough weapons there. I think Mike Elko's a little, if you really asked him, maybe he has some buyer's remorse on the Colin Klein hire. Remember, it came down to Mike Denbrock, who was at LSU, Coach Jaden Daniels, now is at Notre Dame, and Colin Klein. It's a big year for Colin Klein, coaching for his job a little bit. Again, has the best personnel he has ever been surrounded with, though, even going back to his playing days. So, big year. I think he's got a lot he can choose from, and it starts this spring.
Can you imagine Mike Denbrock working with Marcel Reed? Like, just honestly, with that supporting cast, it's I can't even get into it. So Mike Elko is a defensive guy, and Mike Elko said after the Las Vegas Bowl debacle, the one thing that he was most excited for is he would never have to see that secondary again. How poorly they played. Okay, prove it. Prove it this year. There's a lot of returning production. Will Lee is back, the Kansas State transfer. You have Bryce Anderson back for another season. You have Marcus Ratcliffe back. You also have Dalton Brooks and Des Ricks and Tyreek Chappelle and Javen Thomas. But you did bring in Julian Humphrey. He comes from Georgia. And remember, he was the starter for Georgia at the beginning of the year before eventually moving off. You also brought in Jordan Shaw. How is he going to fit for this unit? You have some younger guys that you believe could be plug-and-play starters from week 1. The secondary and the explosive plays that were just allowed down the stretch in the games against South Carolina and Texas. You can even throw in the Auburn game in 4 overtimes. That eventually took A&M out of the running for a college football playoff and in an SEC championship in year 1. And lo and behold, the 8-4 jokes continue to rise on up because of the secondary, an area of strength for Mike Elko for years. He was a former safety at Penn. Like, he appreciates good secondary play. Can we see that no longer be an issue? Because I know the front seven is going to be great. I'm excited to see Cassius Howell stepping on up as the new leading pass rusher. Torian York's a great linebacker. I think they're pretty good on the defensive line with Dayon Hayes and Albert Regis and Tyler Oderlin and DJ Hicks and TJ Searcy and even Samuel Pemba. But if you don't have a good defensive backfield to eliminate the wide receivers, it doesn't really matter unless you're scoring 45 points a game. And then we literally are living in a world where it is circa 2023 Mike Denbrock type style with Jaden Daniels in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, just in College Station, Texas, and Colin Klein's calling the shots.
Guys, Clark Lee and the Vanderbilt Commodores are one of the best stories, not just in the SEC, but all of college football last season, what they did, not just getting to a bowl game, but beating Georgia Tech to get the 7 overall win, smashing that Vegas over-under total. Diego Pavia's back. Pavia power, baby. Pavia magic. My big question is just, can he do it again? And that's more of a 2025 season storyline, but Diego Pavia's back. Like, that's what I'm excited about when I think about Vanderbilt football. And, like, can they run it back and do it again realistically? They snuck up on essentially everybody last year, beat Alabama, beat Auburn at their place, opened up the season beating Virginia Tech. Like, it was a magical, magical year in Nashville. And there's been, there's mixed opinions on whether Diego Pavia should have gotten another year, but he did, and I'm excited about it, and I think we all are, but can they realistically run it back and do it again? That's going to be my big question. They're very old on defense, 4 new starters on the offensive line, but they do have a lot of their top production coming back on the offensive side, again, led by Pavia. But, there's a new excitement, in Nashville. It's led by Diego, but can they realistically run it back and do it again and overachieve and be that fun story again? That's what I'm excited for Vandy, not just in spring, obviously, but going into kickoff.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Chris. You hit it. I mean, you could talk about certain positions because, again, Vanderbilt's never going to be deep. They had some injury luck last year, but, again, not taking away from the season. Yeah, every team needs that. But I'm with you. Now it's going to gotta be like, and let me preface this. I don't think teams in the off-season conditioning programs in the midst of June, July, right before fall camp, are going to have like the V on the weight when they're looking up on the ceiling or on the bench press on the bar. It's going to be rotating around the video. I don't think that. But they're not going to be overlooked this year.
That V, Dave, is plastered all over that facility in Knoxville. I can guarantee you that.
Geez. I hope not. But no, in all seriousness, people are going to be walking into games expecting because they're going to be a story. Again, Diego Pavia getting that extra year of eligibility, coming back. He's the heart and soul of that team. They have enough weapons to come back. A lot of those guys are back from an offensive standpoint. Again, I mean, you have some questions defensively, but I'm with you. How do they handle kind of being that team you can't keep using? I mean, I guess they can internally. It's you might keep doing the Michael Jordan stuff. But that chip on the shoulder thing, people aren't going to be buying into as much. That's going to be internally motivated. It's essentially, hey, they're now kind of, to an extent, as much as Vanderbilt's ever been, the hunted and not the hunter.
Baba Yaga, number 2, he's back. You know how excited I am for it, but what's his best asset? It's his legs. How do you create legs? By having good protection up front, 4 starting offensive linemen. How do they gel together by the end of spring practice? It is such an underlying trait that I don't think enough people pay attention to when trying to build a roster. When you have the same brain and the same motives and the same motion all on the front 5, life becomes a breeze. How do these 4 new dudes all step on in? Isaiah Glass coming on in from Oklahoma State, Sterling Porcher, Jordan White, Gunnar Gibbons. Here's another one that I think a lot of people forget. The 4-star offensive tackle from South Dakota State, Bryce Henderson, comes on in. One of the better offensive tackles from the FCS level. Can they have a cohesive balance and just a good understanding of what Tim Beck's offense is to create those opportunities for Diego Pavia, to create those opportunities out of the backfield for a Cedric Alexander or an AJ Newberry? Because I can promise you, Junior Sherrill and Diego Pavia, they're speaking the same language. Diego Pavia and Eli Stowers, they're on the same wavelength. I don't have to worry about them this spring. What I have to worry about is the offensive line making sure that they're winning their one-on-one battles against the Commodores front 7. So that way, when they enter week 1 and when they enter and they have to go face off against the Virginia Tech Hokies in a rematch in week 4 and enter Sandman's Blaring, we're good. We already know that we're in a great spot for our quarterback to once again deliver. Because I can promise you this, Diego Pavia believes what he says. He is not joking around when he's saying, oh, I'm going to win the Heisman this year. Fully believes it and fully is planning on trying to make it to New York City.
As Diego said one time, and we'll say again, Vandy, we turned. So, guys, that's it. We've hit all 16 SEC teams. We'd love to hear from you all. What are you most excited about, whether it be your specific team, the SEC as a whole? How about the state of college football, the ever-changing landscape? Guys, in closing, I will say this, and I'll let y'all get final remarks in here. I'm just excited to be talking college football again. You know, we're in the midst of basketball season, March Madness about to get going. Of course, baseball season's off and running, conference play around the corner. But it feels good to be back with you gentlemen talking about the pigskin. They're truly – this sport never sleeps, and the reason is we love it so much. It's good to have it back on the field, to see teams out there in as much pads as I guess we're going to get, but helmets at least. The pigskin's flying. Feels good to be talking about it yet again. And the countdown to the 2025 college football season is officially on. And I can't wait to break down all of spring ball with you guys.
Fired up about it, too. I know you're right. Bear's been carrying it with the Sunday Fun Day show. But, yeah, glad we're back. Like you said, Chris, to some extent with some football. But at least we get some people in the media. Like you said, you get to see some body types. Like you said, people in the grass. It'll be fun to watch.
You don't have to hear me come up with hypotheticals anymore. We actually have fun stuff to talk about.
Bears
So that's
creating
fun.
super conferences over here.
I say you don't have to make up those non-soliloquy BS. We actually have good, fun things to talk about moving forward. So I'm excited about that.
Indeed. God bless. Indeed. Again, guys, appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much. Make sure you like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Check us out via podcast, or we get your podcast. You can also find us across all social media platforms, as well as our website, secunfiltered.com. For Dave Shumate and Cole Thompson, I'm Chris Phillips. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in, and we will catch you all on the other side.